See you later. Still work in progress, but we're getting there. Little plants. A kettle. Video studio. Light. Desks. And this is where the magic happens. Right, over to the computer. Hello and welcome to my new office here in central Hackney, where it's all happening. It's a very nice place to base from, and we've got some quite exciting plans for 2020, which is upcoming. Today I just wanted to show you some stuff from one of my test rigs, which is where we're setting up and working through a whole bunch of stuff related to sectional timing. So I know that a lot of you kind of probably don't really understand sectional timing, and the truth of it is that I'm still getting to grips with it myself. My job now, I have the data and I've got clever people to publish it in attractive visual ways, is to find the utility in it and to condense that into ways that mean that you can essentially access it quickly and conveniently, as you do everything else on Geegeez. So that's the grand plan. Now let's just do a quick tour of where we are. I was hoping that it would be nearly ready by now, and it is nearly ready, but I don't want to rush it. I think this stuff's quite important, and if we start off kind of half cooked or on the wrong foot, then it's going to be tricky. If we miss the break, we'll have a heck of a lot of catching up to do. So we're probably looking at an early January release now, just because of Christmas and all that stuff. But I can certainly show you where we're at the moment. So the first thing is that on your My Geegeez page, under the race card options, we've just tidied these up a little bit. You'll notice that down at the bottom here, there's a sectionals options section, and the default will be none, which means that you won't see anything unless you opt to put it on. We don't want this stuff to be intrusive if you're not interested in it, or if you're not interested in it yet. That's absolutely fine. As time passes, we'll be doing lots of editorial stuff. We'll be talking about it. We'll be introducing it to the conversation a lot more, so that over time you'll kind of get your head around it, hopefully. I won't say it's the blind leading the blind, but it's definitely the partially sighted leading the blind at this stage, although I do have a handle on some elements of it, as you'll see. Okay, so that's that. There's also an option to display a GZ rating, which I'll talk about in a second. I probably won't publish this on day one, because we're still kind of, I'm always very apprehensive of ratings, and I just want to make sure that we that we have that absolutely as I want it, rather than just putting a number up for the sake of having a number. Okay, so I've got this set up on visual and cool points, more of which shortly. If you want to change these, of course, you click update and then that does that. So let's have a look at a race. Today is Thursday the 12th, and I'm going to go down to Wolverhampton and this classified stakes here. If I just click on that, you'll see it looks pretty much like any other race card. I've hidden some of these icons just to keep it a bit tidier for me. If I open up the horse icon, you'll see that it is as it is. I've got this GZ column here, but again, don't worry about that for now. But in the top left of the horse form window, we have this option to show sectionals, and if I click that, the view changes, and it changes quite notably. Incidentally, if I click that for 1, then it shows that view for all runners, as you can see there. And I'm going to focus on Dodgy Bob for the purposes of this video. So what we've got is, without the sectionals, we've got weight and then the outcome and the jockey. And then with the sectionals, we've got weight and then we've got a draw column. So in this, let's use this 17th of October run, Bob was drawn 3 of 12. The next section is running lines. Now these running lines explain where the horse was in terms of position and distance behind the leader at 5 points during the race. Now, this is only a 7 furlong race, but we can see that he was 7th, 5 3/4 lengths behind the leader at the first call in this race, and then he was still 7th, 6 1/4 behind the leader, and he made up some ground late such that by the finish he was only 2 lengths behind the leader. So although he only went from 7th to 5th, he's actually made up nearly 4 lengths, well, more than 4 lengths in the latter part of the race off what was a fast pace early. Now you'll notice those blue blocks popping up there as I'm moving the mouse around. Let me explain what's going on there. So because I'm very conscious that this is a new format. Now it is a US style format. If you look in the Daily Racing Form in America, which is their equivalent of the Racing Post in terms of form, or if you look at Equibase or indeed any other American past performance form document, you'll see the form laid out like this with these what they call points of call, and they're just essentially position points during the race, furlong poles in our case, during the race, and at each one they say where the horse was, which position the horse held, and how far behind the leader, or if it was the leader, how far in front of the second the horse was. So it gives us a much better understanding. So for example, with this 17th of October race, we can see unambiguously where the horse was through the race and how far back he was, and compare that with what we used to, which is pushed along to chase leaders, lost place halfway, switched right and headway on outer over 2 out, ridden over a furlong out, stayed on. I think this is a much more concise and accurate articulation of a horse's position, and I think this horse is badly out of form at the moment, so in that regard it's probably not the greatest example, although I will I will flip that on its head in a second when I show you Bob's full form. But for now, that's the running lines, and you can see how they shape up. Now there isn't always a running line because there isn't sectional data for all race courses yet, unfortunately. So if we look at this Leicester line, for instance, we know he was drawn 6 of 8, but then we've just got this big gaping hole here. So what are we doing there? Well, again, we've taken these data here, and we've popped them into the little hover over. So if you hover over it, it tells you that the jockey was Nathan Evans. The horse finished 3rd of 8, beaten 8 1/4 lengths behind Smoky Lane, and it was prominent, pushed along over 4 out, stayed on. So we've still got that information that you would see typically there, and you don't have to flick between the two. You can just hover over with your mouse. So that's that. Now, excuse me. In this section here, we've got a visualization of the race speed against par. Now, par is a definition of a truly run race, given the course and distance. And for those of you that are interested in that, in the user guide, I'll go into a bit more detail about exactly what that means. But what you need to know is that essentially running evenly against par is usually running most efficiently. So in the case of this top run, we can see that the race was even through the first 2 sections, and the finish was quite slow. in this race they went too hard early, which is, you can kind of see that from how far back he was and how he closed off a too fast pace, and the race finish is slow. And here they went even early. They went too fast in the middle, and then they slowed down at the end. So that's quite interesting data, and I'll show you a bit more meaning to that in a second. If you hover over one of these, you will see some information. Now, this fast, even, slow race that I've hovered over here, you can see the top line is S to 5, so that's the start of the race to the 5 furlong pole, in what was a 7 furlong race. You see that there. So from the start to the 5, they went at 101.5%. They went slightly above the pace for the race overall. They went slightly faster in the first section than they did overall, and that's from a standing start. So what that means is they essentially went much faster than par. You can see in the brackets there, they went 6% faster than par in this case. They then slowed it down to a more sensible pace, either by necessity or by design, and in the middle part of the race, between the 5 furlong pole and the 2 furlong pole, they went 2.3% above the race speed, and that was pretty much on par. It was just 0.6% above par. But they paid for those early exertions in the final section, where we can see the race speed was slow. The finishing speed, the speed from the 2 furlong pole to the finish, the 0, was 95.2%, and that was nearly 6% below par for this course and distance. That works out as slow on our metrics. So we can see that's essentially a data articulation, a data presentation of what we've got in the boxes. You don't need to worry about these numbers. You can just use the coloured boxes. Orange or red is fast and very fast. Blue, getting darker blue, is slow or very slow or quite slow. And shades of green are even, with, as you can see here, yellow being quite fast. So that's how that works out. So we can see how a horse has run, where it's been in the race, and we can see the context in terms of the race speed in which it was doing that. Now that is a quantum step forward from what we've historically had, which is disputed lead until headed halfway, driven and lost place, ridden a weakened final furlong. That tells us a little bit, but it doesn't really tell us anything. This tells us a lot more. So that's in the card, and again, as a reminder, you can switch it off like that. If we move over to full form, and we're looking at our mate Dodgy Bob here, and if I just scroll up here, let's have a think about how I'm going to do this, because I want to get all the data in the window so you can see it. There we go. Okay. And what I've done here is I've because we have sectional data since 2016 for Wolverhampton, and our mate Bob runs at Wolverhampton quite a lot, I've just selected the course option on full form here, full form, and we can see that we've got data for all of these now. And again, the layout is the same as the card, which of course I shut down. So we've got draw, running lines and race speed, which is different from the standard layout like that. So what we can see now is, ignoring these two bottom lines where actually they changed from 4 points in the race to 5, but ignoring that, what we can see is essentially when Bob's been on form, and the right hand side number is the horse's finishing position. I should have mentioned that before. So in this case, the 7, he was 7th of 13, 5th of 12, 6th of 11, 9th of 10, and down here 3rd of 11, 2nd of 10, and so on. So the rightmost running line is always the finishing position. So he was 7th beaten 4.5, 5th beaten 2, 6th beaten 5, and so it went on. Now, what's interesting, now we just need to get those the hover over boxes on here so that you can compare that as well. If I go up to places for Bob, if you look at just look at this as a general view, you can see there's quite an array of colour. There's fast races, very slow, quite slows, quite fasts, and so on. But if I look at his placed form, you can see they're almost all even. So what this tells us about Bob is that when the early pace is too quick, it doesn't suit him. Now I think his best form's over 6 and 7, so those 5 furlong runs probably weren't ideal for him anyway. You can see all his good form is at 6 and 7. But what we can see is that when the pace is not even, Dodgy Bob does not run well. So that's an immediate takeaway there. We can see that even in this race here, which was uneven pace, he actually got run out of it at the end because he did too much early in the race, probably. Now that's the race speed, not his sectional speed. That's the leader. When I say the race speed, I mean the leader at the end of each section. And in the middle, that was him. He was the leader in the middle. We can see that there because he was first. But early on, it was another horse, and he was 1 1/4 back. And at the finish, it was another horse who won the race, and he was 1 3/4 back. But you can see that Dodgy Bob essentially is a one-paced horse, and when it's nice and even-paced, he's got his chance to run his race. So that would be an immediate takeaway for this horse in this case. I don't really want to say anything else there. Maybe I'll just put it on unplaced a second, and you can see with the unplaced that basically there isn't a race that's even all the way through, and the one race that was closest to that, even, quite fast even, is the race where Bob ran his best effort of all of these unplaced efforts when he was 4th. And all the other ones he was further back in the field. So he's a one-pacer, and probably not today, but on his day he has a chance if it looks to be an even-paced race. So that is the full form view. Now let's go on to where most of the creative stuff happens, and I want to go back to this 17th of October race here, where it was fast early, even, and slow in the middle. So I'm just going to go to the result for that race, which is here. We can see that Bob was 5th. Now, what you'll notice immediately is that there's lots of stuff going on here. Ignore this playback button. That's nowhere near ready for live, and may never happen, may or may not. We'll see, but ignore that for now. The good stuff is happening behind the charts, sectionals, and running lines buttons. The first thing is that the comments are there, and they're hidden if you don't want to see them. If you use ratings, your ratings are there, and they're hidden behind that button. Running lines, those are these things that I was showing you here. These are the running lines. Oops, where have we gone? For result. So the running lines are here. Now, you'll immediately notice that there's a whole raft of data here. You can essentially ignore the data on the right hand side unless you're focusing on a particular horse for a reason, for any given reason. The running lines are over here, and you can see in Dodgy Bob's case that's that 77645 run. This is the constituent. These are what the sections are. So S start to 5, and his time was 27:32. Aggregate time the same. Then from the 5 to the 4, so that 1 furlong there, he ran 11.61, and his aggregate time is 38:93. And then 4 to 2, and so on. And we can see that his final furlong was 12.85 seconds, which wasn't terribly slow, but it was. They were all slowing down in this race. So those are the running lines. excuse me, we also have sectional data, which again is color coded. Now the race section, this fast, even, slow, is what you saw here. That's that data there. And this represents the leader at each of these points. So the leader at the 5 furlong point, the leader at the 2 furlong point, and the leader at 0, which is the finish. So that's that. And then for each horse, we've got the speed that they went in the race. And we can see, for instance, with Dodgy Bob, he wants to run even paces, but he was invited to go a little bit quicker by the race speed here. So he ended up going quite fast early, and as a consequence, quite slow late, and even through the middle. Cuban Spirit went very fast early and very slow late. Now that's relative to his race rather than to the race overall. So that's that. Now that there is a lot of colour there and a lot of data, so we can hide that. And if we just want to look at a single runner, if we click on the race position for Dodgy Bob, then we get his data only. So we can see there's the comment, there's the OMC as we call it, opening, middle and closing sections. So we've essentially broken every race into 3 parts to do that. What might be confusing is that the running line stuff is in 5 parts, and these are call points. So if you can swap from the OMC view to call points by pressing that, and now you see we've got 5 boxes here, and these boxes represent these 5 sections here. So these data all relate to each other, but 3 points, the OMC, is probably more consumable to begin with than 5, and that's why we've done that. So we've just got basically a start, a middle and an end, and we've done it like that. So that's that. And then of course if you click on Bob's position again, we hide that data, so it's nice and tidy, and a bit less overwhelming than looking at all of that. The chart is a really interesting feature, and it enables comparison in a couple of ways. So let me just talk you through what's going on here a second. At the top of the chart you can see the number of races in the par sample. Now this is a 7 furlong race at Wolverhampton, and we've got loads of 7 furlong races in the par sample. So we've got 291 races in the sample, and that gives us a confidence in our par line which is high. Now there are other races, race distances at courses where we've got very few races in the sample and we have a much lower confidence. Let me just pull one out for you as an example, if I can find one, which I probably can't, because let's have a look at this Brighton race here. And we can see here, so this is a 6 furlong race essentially at Brighton, and we have 26 races only in the sample, so we have a confidence of low, and you can see that the par line is a light grey colour, and that basically means go steady, because we don't have a lot of data here. If I just check a couple of other races on this card, I want to find a very low if I can. I'm not actually trusting that these are all 26 races. Let me just go to the card, go back. I haven't got the result there. Okay, so what happened here on this particular day, of course, the rest of the meeting was abandoned after the 155, or maybe after the 2. Yeah, because it was unsafe ground. I think they had one race later on, but they were all on the sprint track that day, so that was a really bad example to choose. Let's find another one. All Irish, excellent. Note to self, must prepare better. Right, Yarmouth. Yarmouth is good. We actually got quite a bit of data at Yarmouth. So we look at the charts here. Okay, so here we can see that what is quite interesting is we've got the number of races in this past sample is 25, and that is very low. Treat with caution. And then the Brighton one we were looking at was 26, which is essentially the same, but obviously our arbitrary cutoff is at 25 and 26, so that the par confidence for 26 is low as opposed to very low. But either way, if there are less than, say, 100 races in the par sample, I'd be a little bit wary. And of course we're in the data collection stage now, so over time, by the end, for the all-weather, we're in good shape at Lingfield and Wolverhampton and Southall and Newcastle. Over time at the turf tracks, we will get to the same point, but we're probably not there yet. So we've just got to be a bit careful around par lines and what they mean. Anyway, in an example like this where we have got a lot of data, I mean, you can see that the par line is black here, which implies that we have a high degree of confidence about that representing. What par represents is a truly run race. So and the chart is on sectional percentage by furlong. This is a 7 furlong race, so we've got start to 6, 6 to 5, 5 to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1 and 1 to 0. And this is a representation based on the times of all the horses in these 291 races, of how to efficiently use your energy, how a horse can efficiently distribute its energy over this trip. So the start to any number is always lower because the start is a standing start. So 6 to 5, they are running. They're running at the start and they're running at the end. But in the first one, they're standing at the start. So it's always, you kind of get up to speed. And what you find happens in a lot of races, in fact, in most races, is that horses from a standing start over accelerate. So they go too quick through the first running point, and then they kind of level off. They kind of get to the speed that they want to be at. So that's what normally happens. In the case of Sauclair, who won this race, and we can see it was fast early and slow late, and if you look at the chart, you can see that this is the line for Sauclair here. You can see it's above the par line significantly, and that represents it. Anything above is faster than par. And then later on, you can see that it's below the par line. It's slower than par. So that's kind of how we articulate that. Now this view, which is 3, is our OMC, open, middle, close, and we have that on here, so we can represent that there. So we can see this is again significantly above. This is closer to par, just about in the even space, and this is a lot slower than par. So that's that. We've got cool points here as well if you want those, and you can see how that works. As well as sectional percentage, we have finishing speed percentage. Now this is the speed from a point of the race to the end of the race compared with the overall time of the race. And as a consequence of that, the speed from the start of the race to the end of the race is always going to have a finishing speed percentage of 100, because the time for that section, start to finish, is basically the race time. So you can see that they always start on 100 here. And we can see now that this is not, whereas sectional percentage, each point on the chart is independent of every other one, because this is start to 6, 6 to 5, 5 to 4. There's no overlap here. See, each one is a separate section. But with finishing speed percentage, there is a correlation, because essentially the 2 point is always 0. The finishing speed is always relates to the speed to the finish being represented as 0 here. And so we've got 1 to 0, 2 to 0, 3 to 0. So obviously, well, not necessarily obviously, but it is the case that 3 to 0 subsumes 1 to 0 and 2 to 0 within it. So they're not completely independent of each other. If that doesn't make sense, indeed if any of this doesn't make sense at this stage, please don't worry too much, because it's something that we are going to spend, on separate occasions looking at separate elements and taking them from specific race examples. We're going to spend a bunch of time kind of helping you get up to speed with it and helping you to understand how you can use these data to serve your purposes. Now, one of the things that you can do with this, let's just put it back on sectional percentage a second, is you can compare, let's say we wanted to look at the early leader in this race. So let's find out who was leading. At the Cuban Spirit was leading early, of course he was, and then paid horribly for it later. So he's going to be a very interesting one to add onto the chart. We can add any or all of the horses onto the chart by doing this. If we click this button up the top left, it takes them all off, and if we click it again, we get the whole lot. Now that's a bit of a London Underground map rather than anything else. So it's not necessarily very helpful, except that we can see that everything in the race ran above par early, and almost everything ran below par late, with the exception of Sea Ranger, who finished quite well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those all off. I'm going to put par back on. I'm going to put the winner on, and I want to put also Cuban Spirit, who led at a crazy speed early. And you can see, in fact, I'm just going to take Soclair off a second. So remember, the black line is running an efficient race, and Cuban Spirit went mental early, hung tough to about the 2 furlong pole, see 3 to 2. So that 3 to 2 means at the 2 furlong pole. That's the end of that section, and then it went bad. It went very bad for poor old Cuban Spirit. He shot his bolt by here, and it was a long way home for him. He got a 0 upgrade just because he was beaten so far in the end. Again, that's something, upgrades I'll talk about in a second. They are a function of efficiency. Actually, I'll talk about them now. So basically what we're trying to do is, for each horse, let's look at, let's get rid of this crazy horse, and we'll look at this one, and perhaps Caesonia as well. What we're trying to say, and we're basing this on the finishing speed percentage at the C of OMC, so the closing sectional. In a 7 furlong race, that's 2 furlongs, but in a 1.25 miles it would be 3 furlongs, and so on. We change it depending on the length of the race. So let's just put Caesonia on there again. And you can see that his 2 to 0 finishing speed percentage was 94.4. Hopefully you can see that halfway down. Something else I should have mentioned is that if you hover over any of these points, you will get a whole bunch of information about that horse at that point, which is useful if you're looking in forensic detail. What we can see here is that this is the par finishing speed percentage at the 2 furlong to the finish. So you can see that the finishing speed percentage par is 100.9, so slightly above 100%. Because of the nature of the way this race was run, the winner had a finishing speed percentage of 97.1, which we can see the 4th line down there, and this red line we see is Soclair here. Caesonia, who got the biggest upgrade number, 11, did that because this horse did more early and hung tough late, had a finishing speed percentage of only 94.4%. So the upgrade of 11 essentially says that Caesonia, this run was very inefficient, and that horse is capable of significantly better if having its energy rationed more evenly through the race. Again, if we go back to excuse me a second. If we go back to sectional percentage and put Caesonia on here, and take Soclair off, we can see that Caesonia went very fast early and still toughed it out in the middle part of the race, and actually didn't drop off. So compare Caesonia with Cuban Spirit, they both went really hard early, and where Cuban Spirit just lost the will to run in the final furlong, Caesonia actually hung tough pretty well, and that's where it gets its upgrade from, because it was a very good effort, given the nature of how it had run early in the race. So that's how we kind of that's how we look at the sectional data in these graphs. Now there are other things to look at. Sectional time I'm not going to focus on here, but race position is interesting. So we can see, for instance, we know that Sauclair won the race, but we can see that he or she was 7th at the first point of call at the 6 furlong pole, and then 6th, and then 5th, 4th. So he's made a very almost a linear move through the race. And if we compare that with, again, Cuban Spirit, who led and then was still 2nd at the 2 furlong pole, but had a very difficult last quarter, and Caesonia, who was 2nd and then actually took it up when Cuban Spirit started to fade. You can see that they've flip-flopped here between the 3 furlong and the 2 furlong poles, and Caesonia hung on, even having chased that really fast early pace, hung on until the furlong and then just faded out of it to 4th. That was a very meritworthy effort in the circumstances. So that's interesting. And then we've got the distance behind the leader, and we can see with Sauclair that this horse was sort of 5 lengths behind the leader in the early part of the race, made a move to get much closer, sort of 2 to 3 lengths behind the leader up to the quarter pole, and then essentially slowed down less markedly than its rivals in the final part of the race to take the lead, while others were wilting, like Caesonia and Cuban Spirit. So we can look at Cuban Spirit here. The fact that it's on the 0 line means it led, and then, just paid for that late significantly in the last furlong, where it lost between, so it was 4 1/4 lengths behind at the furlong pole and 16 lengths behind at the finish. So it lost 12 lengths in the final furlong, probably eased off because it was, excuse the parlance, knackered. Caesonia similarly was close to the pace, chased a fast pace early, hung tough, and was only beaten 2 at the end. That's a very good effort in the circumstances, and that's why Caesonia gets the big upgrade figure here. So those are the charts, and again we can do this by call points, we can do it by OMC, or we can not worry about it at all. What else do I want to say? Maybe not anything else. I think that's enough. I just one thing, the GZ rating, which we have in this column here, and again I won't be publishing these on day one because I'm not convinced we're where we need to be with those yet, and I'm always very wary of ratings, particularly I think there's a high degree of responsibility with the ratings set, and because I know that, for instance, in this case, the King's Steed, who incidentally was in this. Oh, sorry, yeah, this is the race. This is my example race. I just want to put this one back on. I know that people, in this case, this horse is 7 clear at the top of the ratings, and people would focus on that horse. I haven't yet done enough analysis, kind of regression testing of these numbers to be confident that they are that they could be a component within your form study overall. Now, I don't think anybody would recommend using a rating blindly. In other words, not looking at the full form alongside it, and I certainly wouldn't. But I won't be publishing these numbers. There will be in due course a GZ rating, and it will encompass a speed rating and an upgrade. based on sectional performance, but until I'm comfortable that it has utility, that it has value, I won't publish it. So it's going to take as long as it takes for us to get to that point. But you can have some assurance that when we do get to that point, it'll probably be worth looking at, and it'll be worth it being a factor in your betting. Now, as with any other rating, certainly speed rating, form ratings are slightly different, but with a speed rating, if the horse is completely unsuited to conditions, or the race setup doesn't look appropriate, then the speed rating's probably not worth a lot. They are circumstantial, they are contextual, and need to keep that in mind when you use them. This GZ rating will be no different in that regard. So that is probably more than enough. I appreciate that there may be a million questions in your mind, or you may have lost the will to live with this stuff very early. Both of those are perfectly acceptable emotions to end up with. And as I say, over the course of time through 2020, we'll be talking about this on a regular basis and bringing this stuff to life and helping you to get to grips with it. As I get to grips with it myself, again, I make no apology for, although I bet every day, and I consider myself something of a form student. This is a new frontier, and I'm still coming to terms with how best to use the data. So I don't present myself as an expert. I present myself as an enthusiastic, interested punter, and I'm open-minded enough to know that there is utility here, and it's up to me to help myself and you to unlock its potential. And with that said, I think that's more than enough for today. That's Matt Bisogno. I hope you enjoyed a first look at how sectional data is going to manifest itself on Geegeez, saying thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.